We're standing in the museum of Mr. Moody, but it is attached to the very birth house where Mr. Moody was born. And here is the very cradle that when he was born, that they used in the early part of his life, that they would rock him to sleep. And of course, they used this just for a few months after his birth. Well, this is a rare privilege to be in the homestead of Mr. Moody. And I was just relaying to some of the group that Mr. Moody, when he purchased this, it was a very unusual or under unusual circumstances. His mother lived right up the hill in the birthplace of Mr. Moody. And she raised chickens at the time, and the chickens used to have a tendency to come down the hill and to get into the neighbor's lot in his gardening, and so he used to get quite upset. And one day Mr. Moody came back from being on tour to visit his mother, and his mother said to him, she said, "Son, the chickens have been in Mr. So-and-so's yard again, and would you go down there and see if we can make amends and that he would be more receptive to us in this area?" And so Mr. Moody came down the hill there, and when he came and met the neighbor was, first thing he said, "Your mother's chickens have been down here time and time again. You have to control them and keep them up the hill. I'm tired of them being in my garden." Mr. Moody said, "We don't want to have any bad feelings towards one another." He said, "Would you be willing to sell this house?" And the man thought for a moment. He said, "Yes, I'll sell the house, but you have to buy everything, the property and the home." Mr. Moody said, "How much would you ask for it?" And the neighbor gave him quite a substantial amount that he wanted. And Mr. Moody had just been on a meeting, and there was a man in that meeting that wanted to give Mr. Moody a love offering. Mr. Moody said, "No, I don't want it." And the man said, "Yes." He said, "God has impressed me to give you this amount." Mr. Moody said, "That's very kind of you, sir." And the man finally said on the third time, he said, "Do you want to rob me of a blessing?" He said, "God has told me to give you this amount." So Mr. Moody took the money and put it into his pocket, not knowing that when he came to visit his mother, this opportunity would come. And so the man, when he gave him the price, he gave him quite a high price. And Mr. Moody reached into his pocket, and it was the exact amount that man gave him as a love offering, and he gave it to the farmer, and that's how he bought the home. Now the Moodys moved in here, which is called the homestead, And through the years, they had a wonderful life here, and this is where the Northfield schools actually started, in this home. Mr. Moody put on an addition for the girls until the first building was completed. But the reason that we are standing here in this master bedroom, because this is where Mr. Moody went home to be with the Lord. And I've read the account many, many times where he called his family in and began to talk to them about eternity, and he went right around from his dear wife to his children, gave them instructions, what he wanted them to do. And then there's a quote here, as Mr. Moody was dying, it says, "Earth is receding, heaven is opening, God is calling me." And with those words, he closed his eyes and went home to be with the Lord right here from this master bedroom. You know, sitting here in the original chairs that were in the Moody Auditorium at the time of all the men and women of the past spoke right here from the platform, I've often thought about the impact and the person that was seated here and what they took from the meeting, and they went back to their place in the world and the impact that they made in the world. It's amazing the history. And if these chairs could speak, what would be spoken about all the people that had their lives changed and impacted from the messages and from the teaching right here in Northfield. We're here in the old cemetery in Northfield, and I wanted to bring this to your attention. This is Daniel Webster Whittle. He worked very closely with D.L. Moody, and of course his daughter, Mary Whittle, married Will Moody, and of course Mr. Moody and Mr. Whittle became very close friends as well as being related. But I wanted to relate just one story about Mr. Whittle. Going back years when they were in Chicago, they were in a great meeting there in Chicago. And of course, Mr. Varley was there speaking in Chicago. And after the morning service, Mary Whittle and Will, and of course, Mr. Whittle, they left the service with Mr. Varley to go to eat lunch. And there was special music that day, and the song that was given that made impression upon Mr. Varley was the song given just before the message, and that was, "I Need Thee Every Hour." And when they came out, they were walking down the streets of Chicago there, and Mr. Varley turned to Mr. Whittle and he said, "You know, I like that song, I Need Thee Every Hour," but he said there's something missing, because he said, "I find that I need God every moment." And immediately, Mary Whittle said her father looked at her and she looked at him, and she knew that he had a new hymn in his heart. And so the song Moment by Moment was born right there on the streets of Chicago. Wonderful song, Moment by Moment, how we need the Lord, not only every hour, but moment by moment throughout the day.